Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Reed, and I am here with Mr. Tony Mormino. Didn't butcher that, did I?
No, perfect.
Wonderful. And I'm with the wonderful, I guess you can't see it here, but HVAC Know It All. So Gary couldn't make it this year. He sent me instead, another fellow Canadian. As a part of the requirements to work with Gary, I had to retain my beard, trim it to a very specific length. But it was worth it. I have enjoyed my time so far here down at AHR 2025. Have you liked it, Tony?
I loved it. This is like a content creator's paradise, so it's a lot of fun. I think one of the busiest ones I've ever been to.
It's been a very energetic year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it. And thanks for having me on the podcast, too. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Thanks for coming. It is end of the day, day 3. So I'm surprised we still have our voices.
I still have gas in the tank, which is surprising, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's use that gas to talk about something important, something that a lot of techs struggle with, which is sales.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk specifically about sales of commercial equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that, Tony, maybe you can fill the audience in a little bit on your background about where you came from and what you specialize in.
Yeah, sure. So I got introduced to the HVAC community through my dad, Joe Mormino, shout out, who was a residential installer, and went on a couple job sites with him. And he really, my dad came from the generation where if you're able to go to college, you go to college, right? Like that's and God bless him, he wanted me to do that. So I ended up going to college, got an engineering degree, but I always was like being pulled towards HVAC. And I also was always pulled towards sales for some reason. I worked my way through college what's that?
Oh, it's just weird. Most engineers do not gravitate towards sales.
Totally. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, like my experience with that. And, it was kind of frowned upon in the engineering community. Like you're going to waste your engineering degree and go into sales. But I had grown up kind of waiting tables and being on the front of the house. I worked in the back of the house of restaurants too.
Used to working with people. Yep.
Used to work with people. And I thought, well, sales will be fun. But at the time, there was no there was this thing called the World Wide Web when I was going in college, so there wasn't any information on there.
Was this before the .com bubble or after?
Way before.
Okay.
We didn't even know what the .com was. I mean, it was like, what does www mean? What do you type that in for? So there was no information out there, and I happened to stumble upon a seminar that one of the big manufacturers was doing, and they talked about this career called a sales engineer, and I was like, oh, okay. That
Marrying my two loves.
Marrying my two loves. So I, in HVAC, which was the love from my dad. And then I sat there and I'm like, this is for me. This is what I want to do. So anyway, that's how I got into the field. That's my background. I would say one of the things I've learned, I've talked about sales in general, is anybody could do sales. Like I had this misconception that it was the guy who's real boisterous and he's partying all the time with people and there are salesmen who do well by doing that. I've never been that type of salesperson. I'm more of a nerdy, can I come by and educate your new engineers in psychometrics?
But there's a stereotype that most people are used to that, and there's a gap between what most people who are techs, who are fixers, and then those, at least from what I hear, the white shirts. That's in the residential side. Again, a lot of the home performance contractors that I work with, they do not like the white shirts because they come in and they oftentimes sell things that the customer doesn't need, but because they are convincing enough and the homeowner doesn't know any better.
Right.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot of that from my father. And of course, I'm in the commercial side is my experience, but I watched my father, he would almost not charge enough. And I'd be like, Dad, you got to get paid for because he was such a nice guy. He wanted to help people and he would never that I knew of sell anything that they didn't need. But I have a little bit of a disdain for that too. And I see some things on social media that makes me cringe because they're talking about, not being very honest with customers. Yeah. So I can tell you in the commercial world, that is extremely rare. A lot of the commercial folks that I've worked with, I would say 98% of them because our business is foundational on relationships.
Yep.
Okay. I was a sales engineer in Jacksonville for 20 years. It was the same, 40 people I called on for those 20 years. Right. So the process of building a relationship will quickly vet out the people who are not honest and not good at their job.
But also, just again, kind of creating that juxtaposition between the residential and the commercial side, I think one of the reasons why the relationships are so much more important there, rather they end up having such a bigger impact, is because the scale of those projects means that there's a lot more, I guess, accountability and liability that's attached to the end-to-end process of putting equipment into a building. Like in residential, at least from what I've seen, is that a lot of people can just get in, toss in a box, and get out. And the homeowner, as long as it's blowing hot or cold air, they're okay with it. But in commercial, there's a lot of metrics. There's a lot of there's investment that people are measuring. And so if you don't actually have if you don't understand that it's going to be a long-term relationship in commercial, then you're not going to last very long.
Not at all. And there's I'm glad you brought this up, because there is a huge responsibility, because a lot of times the design engineers rely on their rep as the go-to expert on things. And if you're deceiving and you steer them in a way that's not good for them, but good for you, it could cost them their business. Like, it's a major, major deal. You're looking at this facility here. I don't know how many square foot we are, but this has got to be, 10,000 tons of air conditioning in this facility. And it can make or break a company, either a contractor, or a design engineer, general contractor, and it really has a ripple effect. So, my goal was always to be the consultant to the consultants. My favorite call was, Tony, we got this job. We want to do A, B, and C on this job. What do you got? And I knew it wasn't a good fit for me. And I tell them, you know what? If you use my product, we can do it. We're way overkill. You're going to get embarrassed on price. It's over-engineered. But here's who to call. And I would always give them a list of people who are reputable. Like, these guys are my competition. I hate security there, but they do have a product that would fit well with that. That's the best call you can get, because it totally builds trust and faith in your relationship. You know what I'm saying?
Well, because you're providing value, not products.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's a big shift. Yeah. Like, if you're a technician that's, I guess, hasn't gone into the sales world and find it a bit kind of trepidatious, it's a mindset shift where, yes, a lot of the manufacturer training might be like, you're supposed to sell this product or that product, but you can get very comfortable having a lot of very pleasant, actually quite rewarding interactions if you shift away from believing that you're selling a device or really a service, and you're just helping solve somebody's problems, because we're all humans who want to connect to each other. And so it's a shift in the perspective of what a sales role is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, when you look at it I did a post a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember all the points, but they were brilliant, trust me, of a successful account. We used to call them sales engineers. We now call them account executives. I'm not sure why the shift, maybe to get the word sales out of it. But, one of the keys of a successful account executive, when you look across our family of brands and in our company, is they're out to help the customer become more successful. Yeah. How can I make the customer become more successful? You give away training, you give away this, you email them stuff that's useful for them. You know when to back off when you're not the right fit, and you know when to fight when you're the right fit. That's as important. It took me a lot of years to learn that, because I'm not a big, if the contractor and engineer want to go a certain way, I didn't want to mess them up. But there was a few times I can remember which were pivotal in my career. I was like, look, I don't fight you guys a lot. You're making a huge mistake. Go see their factory. Go see my company's factory. And this is where, especially with niche products that the engineers and contractors aren't familiar with, you might see a pretty submittal, and I can make a submittal look pretty, but it doesn't mean I can build that unit right. And I've been in the room before where they came back and said, yeah, you were right, we should have listened to you. But anyway, yeah, so.
But yeah, that whole, if you see something, say something, if you have that technical role of supporting that buying process. And I know that myself, I'm going to be honest, I hate sales. It is something I'm very uncomfortable with. I used to be way more uncomfortable and standoffish about ever doing things related to sales. I've gotten a lot better now, because I'm understanding that it's not a process of selling something that people may or may not need. It's about solving a problem. But you have, especially if you're technical and you're supporting the sales process, it is a responsibility that you have to make sure that everybody is informed, and sometimes they have biases that might need to be overcome, and you might be the guy to do that. And so stepping out of your comfort zone, that's Do you have any tips for
Yeah.
somebody who's in that uncomfortable situation and may, potentially face blowback, like for stepping out and saying something about the situation because they know that product isn't going to work in that particular plant or on that rooftop that's being installed?
I mean, the best thing you could speak from is your experience, right? No one can argue with your experience. And if they trust you, then they trust you're telling them the truth. But, speak from your experience. Look, I know you want to go with that. That's cool. The product I'm giving you, here's why you want to go with this product or a similar one. Because sometimes they might be looking at something that's just not going to be like, dude, that's not going to work. You're going to have to upgrade that over time. You don't have to buy mine, but you want to be in this category of product. You get what I'm saying? So there's that. Like,
here's your guardrails.
Exactly. You're sharing your experience there. The other thing is to, I don't know where I heard this, but someone said, don't try to convince people, but speak with conviction. And that small, it sounds like a small little nuance, but it's huge. Like, look, if you don't want to buy it, that's fine. But let me tell you what my experience is. Here's what, I've dealt with in the past and yada, yada, yada. And the other thing I would say when we were talking about like sales in general is I learned long ago, any personality could be in sales. And I heard this, somebody equated this to comedians. And I'm totally going to date myself because I don't know who any of the new comedians are, but like Bob Newhart, Stephen Wright were really dry. Ooh. Exactly. They were really dry comedians if you look them up, but they were hilarious. But then you had like the rambunctious, boisterous ones like Eddie Murphy and stuff like that who were hilarious, but a different style. But they were both very successful. The point is like you could be a nerdy engineer like me and be good at sales, or you could be like I was never a good taking contractors out for beers and golfing and doing this kind of stuff. I wasn't.
Because that's the stereotype.
And that's the stereotype.
Yeah. And that's what's popularized. That's what everybody sees. And so there aren't enough examples of people demonstrating that if you're your authentic self and figure out what your strengths are, that if you bring that to the table, that's probably going to be your best sales asset.
100%. Self-awareness is huge in all aspects of any career, I think. And, I know that
all life.
All life. And I know the things I'm good at and I stick with those and trying to make myself better at something. That's just not my shtick. It's a recipe for burnout, I think.
Yeah. Well, learning new things is great, but it's knowing when to back off, and especially if you're especially in commercial, you're a part of a team. You are oftentimes a part of a buying process that has a buying committee.
Yeah.
And so there are sometimes between 3 and 15 people that are a part of making a decision. And so being aware of not just yourself but also the other people that are there, and kind of trying to navigate like, okay, here's my corner, here's where I can provide value, but then there's these other guys here, so that if I'm not comfortable with this, either I can go to my own manufacturer support for additional help on this so I don't have to speak out of my ass, or there's somebody else here as a part of this process that I can talk to just get everything going so much faster and smoother.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm a little curious, that was one of the questions I had kind of coming into this is, again, for the uninitiated, to kind of understand that if you're getting into that sales process in commercial, I have a lot of background in doing market research and understanding some of the processes around why people make decisions and buy products. And so that term that I used, buying committee, is that something that you've come across often in your work and you can speak to?
I don't have a lot of experience with that, actually. Most of the buying decisions were by, at the end of the day, the mechanical contractor who was awarded the bid.
Yeah.
And if we've done our job right, we're in a position where the job's kind of sold because it's lined up for our products and our specialties ahead of time. But there are some where I guess committees were involved in that.
But
sure.
Okay, it's not an official committee. It's more of a symbolic one. So I'll just
I see,
I'll just put some examples. Like there's an influencer. So like
totally,
if you talk to let's say a maintenance technician, they're not going to be making the purchasing decision. But they will have some input in the scenario.
Right, and maybe the engineer and the contract. I get it.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so there's influencers. There's the actual decision maker. And then there's a couple other roles kind of scattered throughout there. So maybe in your own words, when you're kind of dealing with commercial sales, typically are there a few different types of people or personas that you interact with where you need to kind of give them different information as a part of your sales process?
100%. Yeah. So the engineer has different concerns than the maintenance guy, than the building owner, and then the contractor. And I guess
And you need to switch hats through the process.
Yeah, so you need to switch hats and try to find out what their pain points are and address those pain points. Like the maintenance guy wants it something legit that's going to last and he can maintain, and the engineer may be more concerned with energy efficiency, and the building owner may be concerned with sustainability. So yeah, for sure. Yeah, wear a bunch of different hats.
Yeah, and kind of like I read, I think that Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People many years ago. And like, it's, again, talking about simple concepts that are hard to master. The whole, like, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, like try to listen before you are trying to deliver your own opinions to the situation.
Empathy comes to mind.
Yeah, so much simpler. So you take an education-based approach to sales, right?
Yeah.
But you give that a particular name, and what does that look like for your process?
I don't know that I have a name for it, but I definitely have been always more of the educator type to build a relationship. And I have found that the best marketing you can do or the best brand building you could do is help someone on their journey from point A to point B to whether they're doing. There's a value, I call that a value gap, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to bring value, especially if you're new to sales or new to calling on an engineering firm. The last thing you're going to do is roll in there and ask for a spec or a sale or something like that. You're going to say, hey man, I'm new here. I'd love to meet your team. Here's a suite of trainings I could offer, and I'd love to come do that for you.
Start with humility. Yep.
Yeah, because you got to earn it. Nothing's going to be given to you. Sales is not. Commercial HVAC sales is not for sissies. I mean, it could be a brutal job. It's very difficult. You can work on a job for a year and lose it and get paid nothing.
Whoa.
So it's not always an easy job. Now it is very rewarding. It's probably the next best thing to owning your own business in terms of income and freedom and stuff like that. So if you're entrepreneurial and don't want to own your own business, that's a good way to make good money. So
yeah, good money, but it has its own risk profile. Like
100%.
Like the whole working on a project for, I know a couple of sales engineers where I meet them after a deal fell through. And they're just completely deflated for like almost a full week, like almost into a mini depression. So it doesn't happen often, but
and that never gets easier.
Yeah.
We tell people when they're new, look, what you're feeling now, in 30 years, you'll be feeling the same thing if that happens again, but you just got to deal with it, and you got to deal with until the point where you don't. And I got to a point in my career where I was kind of burned out. I was like, I need to do something different. And, unfortunately, I waited too long to do something different because I was stuck in fear. Like I didn't want to make a change because it's scary to make a change in a career, especially when you're a little older in your life. I was 45 when I started 47-ish when I started a new career in what I do now, which is more of online training and marketing and stuff like that. So, which I enjoy, and I'm glad I'm not in sales anymore. But
yeah. So back to the kind of commercial equipment sales. What category of equipment did you usually deal with in your field of work?
Yeah, so I mostly dealt with applied equipment, which is non-cataloged equipment, large chillers, custom air handlers, built-up air handling units, things like that, pumps, cooling towers, some cataloged equipment too, but that's primarily what I dealt with, chill water, DX type equipment.
And the types of, buildings or customers that would be purchasing those were?
Pretty much all over the place, anything from a strip mall to I think the largest job I did was a 15,000 ton district cooling plant with centrifugal chillers. That was a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to get an order of 5 big units that are all the same. It's super easy to enter the order, but so anything from schools, office buildings, you name it, I've probably had my hand in one of those types of applications.
Okay, and then maybe just for the people that aren't familiar, like what does that process look like from start to finish? Because sometimes there might be RFPs involved, but maybe if you could take people through that typical journey.
Sure. Yeah, so it all starts with the mechanical engineer, at least in terms of in my experience. So you want to really build relationships with the local mechanical engineers. The best call you can get is, hey, we just got this job. It's a hospital. What do you think about this? Can we work together on a couple options and budgets? Then you're kind of in the project. You're in the beginning stages of the project. And the consultant's going to call the people who are going to look out for them. They don't want to call a guy who's got, one solution for every project because that's the only solution he sells. That's not the guy they're going to typically call. So you got to look at it from that standpoint. So you build a relationship with the engineer as the plans develop and the owner's okay with the direction in terms of the product they're going to specify. Let's say it's manufacturer A to keep it neutral, right? and I rep that product. They're going to specify to manufacturer A. The contractor goes out to bid. The plans and specifications go out to bid. 5 mechanical contractors bid it. Mechanical contractor B gets the job and he buys out the job. Now he may buy my equipment, which is more likely than not because I'm on the plans. So everything's based on my equipment. So if the price is reasonable and it's not out in Left Park, I'll probably get that job. And then, so I would sell the job to the contractor. That's where the sales part comes in to try to close the order. Then you get the order, and then you got to go through the submittal process, which means you're basically creating a small book telling them what they're getting. They approve the submittals, the engineer does, and then you order the equipment, ship it, and then if you start it up and there's no issues, you're done with the project. Sometimes there's issues that last years because we were dealing with big mechanical projects. So yeah, so that's basically the process.
Yeah, and well, it's from my experience of working with some capital projects. I was in a startup that was doing digital twin technology for massive scale, like basically oil refineries and stuff like that. It seemed like that 50 to 80% of those scale of projects all were either over budget or over schedule. And so on the commercial side, what would you say is the ratio of those kind of projects that go off the rails? Is it a lot lower than that?
I would say it's lower than that in my experience. I would say maybe 20 to 30% go over budget. Yeah. It might even be less than that. I'm not really sure. I've been out of the game for a little bit, but then you go through the value engineer. We call it a VE process, value engineering process, where contractors will get with the vendors and say, okay, this job's over budget. What do you think? And then we submit a list of line item menu of, okay, if you get rid of the coil coatings, or if you go to 2 fans instead of 4 fans, things like that. So
cool. So do you have any, war stories, like anything really memorable of a sales experience that taught you something really important that made you who you are today?
That's a great question. I think early on, I had some really good mentors. There was this huge contractor in Jacksonville, which I was assigned to call on, and they'd seen newbies come and go for 20, 30 years, right? So, here comes the new guy, and I remember I can't remember what the problem was. I remember it was extremely painful. And I remember being at the contractor's office, and I'm way too passionate. I care way too much, if that's possible. But, I would stay up at night worried about it. Oh my gosh, they're never going to buy. I got to take care of these guys. And I remember going to their office after 3 weeks. We're still trying to fix this thing. And I said, man, I can't tell you how much I hate this. I can't believe we can't fix it. He's like, Tony, relax. He said, this was the advice that changed me. He said, you know what? It's what you do when the shit hits the fan that differentiates you from the other guys. Like, anybody could be here when things are good. You've been here every day trying to fix the problem. That separates you, and it means a lot to us. So that kind of stuff. Yeah.
It goes back to that demonstrating value, but also showing that you really care about their outcomes. And you're not just there to say that, okay, as soon as that check is signed, then I've forgotten about you. Because that's what we all want. Like when we're getting treated, during an interaction, when we're trying to do something that's really important to us, I don't like to just kind of be thrown away by somebody else as soon as that interaction is done. So.
And I've worked on projects with, partners that did not take care of their jobs after the fact, and we suffered for that. Some guys will say, well, I was gonna buy the order from you guys, but so and so wasn't there when I needed them for 2 months. When I called, he wouldn't answer the phone. That kind of stuff will kill you in the industry, right? Even if you don't have a solution yet, you got to pick up the phone and you got to talk to them and deliver bad news immediately. That's another thing I've learned, with humility.
Yeah, that's very important. And back to some of your, maybe not war stories, but I see that a lot of your content, you are, maybe some of your older content, you're like on the factory floor, you're doing a lot of on-site work, or at least content related to like rooftops or big chiller plants. How often in your sales engineer role were you working, let's say, behind the scenes in the office versus on the job site or at the factory?
That's a great question. More in the office than I wanted to be, but a lot of times you just get, if you're lucky and you're blessed, you get a lot of orders, which keeps you in the office. But I was always a hands-on guy. I'd love to go. I actually had a tool bag with for me, there were a lot of tools, but I had like the voltmeter and the gauges, and I would go hook them up. A lot of sales guys won't do that, but I like to know how the machines work and test the pressures and stuff like that. So I would say 10% of the time I was on a job site. and very rarely in a factory, which I regret, because factory tours are a great tool if you're a sales guy, and not just from you to learn, but to build a relationship with your customer. Right. Like you could show me a catalog of a custom air handling unit panel for 10 years. Until I go see it, I'll be like, oh, okay, I get it now. I just can't visualize it in a catalog. So,
but I think that's speaking to what we talked about earlier in kind of the building value, building relationship, and finding out what your unique value proposition is that you're aware of that you can bring to the table. With that stereotype of whether, I don't know if they're not called white shirts though in the commercial game now, but in any case, that kind of slick salesperson stereotype, that there's a lot of people that maybe, they're a little bit, they've tasted it so often, kind of it's gotten to the point of like fast food where like, sure, McDonald's is good once in a while, but you don't want it all the time.
Right.
And so bringing that type of educational, the curiosity and data-driven value that a lot of technicians, that you start out in the field as a technician, and if you wanted some variety in your role and kind of move into a different part of your career, you don't have to become that slick salesperson. Mm-hmm. You can end up taking the route that you took, which is just basically showing up and being like, wow, I like to learn how this works, and now I'm gonna share that with you in a way that helps us get to the next part of this relationship. So I kind of want to talk about that for a little bit.
Sure.
Because for those technicians that maybe the field work is getting a little bit either tedious or they're maybe a little burnt out. If they want to make that transition, and what kind of steps would they have to take?
That's a great question. Journey? And as you were talking, I was thinking like, there were many times in my career where if I could, I would pull a technician into a high-level meeting with owners and engineers, because they will listen to them way more than they'll listen to me, right? Because they can talk to, look, we had this 2,000-ton central chiller plant, we did this and this and this, and it's real-life experience, right? So it's like stuff sometimes I couldn't speak to. But anyway, to go back to your question, for a technician, I think a really good sales role is what we call an owner salesperson.
What's that?
So in our industry, at least in the Southeast, we have salesmen, like I used to be a sales engineer, account executive, will call on engineers and contractors. And then you have sales guys that work for manufacturer rep firms that call on owners. We call them owner sales. So they're specifically going and meeting with this facility would be a perfect opportunity. The building owners, the maintenance, usually you start with the maintenance guys, say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I rep these 20 products. I know you have some of them here. If you need parts, if you need filters, if you need this. Technical support, I'm your guy. If you're going to replace something, I'd love to give you a budget or technical specifications. Those are great opportunities for technicians because you have hands-on experience in the field on those products. You can relate more to the building guys than the sales engineer can.
Yeah, but so the process though, like if you're just going right from a technician, you could like start your own little LLC and just start calling up building owners and be like, hey, like I'm... Like, do you have to have relationships with the equipment manufacturers before you?
So let me back up. So most rep firms have building owners sales. So in other words, our rep firm in the Carolinas, which is currently called Insight Partners, we're changing the name to Air Carolinas. We have owner sales where we hire them. Okay. And we have a line card, and we have a controls company, and we have a parts department, and they could go sell any of that.
Yeah, so they can be integrated into that existing machinery, without having to try to like build it all themselves.
You can start your own business and that's a
lot of work. Yeah,
ton of work. I would say if you're a technician and you want to go into sales, look up your 5 biggest commercial rep firms in your area and go talk to them. Say, hey, look, and I can tell you if you make a call and say, hey, I'm a technician and I'm considering going to sales, can I get a few minutes of your time? Most people would say, yeah, sure, come on by.
Now,
and then they try to hire you as a tech too.
Of course, yeah. What question should a tech ask one of those rep firms to know that it's the right type of fit for them, though? Like that it's the right kind of environment that will support their curiosity-driven approach instead of, trying to form them into a slick salesperson.
Yeah, so again, I can tell you like almost all of the rep firms that I've been involved in have been very... I use the word good old boy because kind of we're in the South, but very like caring about their customers. I've met very few of the slick types. I can't even think of one, honestly. It's such a stereotype that's just not present in our industry that I've seen.
Yeah, but there's still a couple bad eggs out there.
There could be
that are just all numbers driven. Where it's not about the people. So maybe it's a question could be like what's the longest relationship that you have with somebody in the region?
Yeah, that would be a great question. And maybe ask to shadow some of the guys that are there. That would be a really good one. And look at their product line. You might know chill water real well, but you don't know Package DX. And if all they sell is Package DX, maybe that's not, the company for you to work for. But I would say it's funny. Someone on LinkedIn just texted me or messaged me like last week, like, I'm a service tech. I want to go into sales. What do you recommend? And I said, find the 5 biggest commercial rep firms in your area and go talk to them. Just pick up the phone and go talk to them, Yeah,
that's great. Now, I guess your experience with now spent 5 years now at Insight Partners?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's been your role there, and I guess what's that machinery look like on the inside? You said you talked a little bit about the different line cards, but maybe some behind the scenes understanding, so that if somebody were to start launching themselves into this side out of being a technician in the field, what should they prepare themselves for? What's the day-to-day look like?
So the day-to-day for me was selecting equipment for engineers, which was on the computer programs and stuff like that, handling any job site issues, startup coordination, ordering equipment, which is the least fun part of the job, to be honest with you.
Filling out forms, you're on the phone a lot.
And then doing submittals. It's a lot of the stereotype of the golfer and the party and the sales guy. There's very little of that compared to the behind the scenes grind work is very boring and tedious, and
sounds very administrative.
It's very administrative, and most of the guys have like an assistant to handle a lot of this stuff, but they're still so big. If you're moving, $5 to $10 million of gear a year, it's constant. Your phone's ringing. That happening. That's happening. We don't see a lot of service techs come up through the sales engineer role. It's possible you can. Most of the service techs we see go into the owner sales side.
Okay,
is what I've seen. But again, call your local. I would say there's different paths. And you're passionate about it. Call and talk to your local rep firms.
More behind the scenes knowledge from yourself. How is artificial intelligence shifting how yourself and maybe some of your colleagues as they are kind of navigating the sales world? Do you have a plethora of LLMs and other AI tools that you're now using to make your job easier?
I recently was using it, and I'm not in sales right now. I do use it a ton in marketing. Okay. Content creation. I use it all the time. I use ChatGPT like 3 times a day.
Just ChatGPT?
I use that. I use a program called Synthesia. I use Opus Clips. Probably a couple more that I can't think of right now. Midjourney.
Yep.
So those are the ones I use as a content creator. As a salesman, there are a few programs right now that'll go through and read plans and specifications and give you a summary. Like, this rooftop unit needs these 15, pieces of accessories. That's the word I was looking for. So there are AI tools to use that. I haven't used them that much, but you can't. But that stuff's coming.
Yeah, the manufacturers are all going to have their own AI, ecosystems, where all of their manuals, all of their training materials, it's all going to now be accessible to a customized artificial intelligence bot of some sort. That probably, as a salesperson, you get a much deeper access to it than, let's say, tech would. Like Copeland, we were checking them out earlier. We're going to have some content on that where they're demoing their new Scout, where they've loaded it with absolutely everything, like all their data from the last 20 years or 50 years is inside that new Scout bot. But
so you could ask it a question.
Yeah, and it not only is able to reference any piece of documentation they've ever written, and kind of create a cohesive answer around it instead of just kind of randomly hallucinating. It also has access to a lot of real-time information for understanding the distributors. It can basically access an API to see if the parts are in stock nearby. And so, it's just going to keep getting more and more integrated. But for writing, though, you really got to check out Claude.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Anthropic. It is. There is nothing that can beat it as far as creative writing.
I can't stand writing, so that's why I do a lot of videos.
Oh, it's fantastic, and their context window is really, really big, and so you can load in lots of documents, and it's just so much more cohesive and intelligent than ChatGPT, at least in my experience. And I've tried Gemini and a couple others as well.
Cool.
So, Yeah.
What's it called?
Claude. So it's a company called Anthropic.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll check that out.
All right, let's get back to the HVAC side now. Amanda, because my background is I'm startups, telecommunications, engineering, product design, and so I spend a lot of my day behind a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my day out in the field, like mostly learning and trying to shadow and kind of get to understand all those problems that everybody's facing in the industry. Because I've just worked with too many entrepreneurs that don't know. They build a product that isn't connected to the end user as well as it should be. So.
The plug and play products?
No, the ones where there's a dream that they can solve a problem that they aren't super intimately familiar with.
No, I know it. Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, back to HVAC. So, would you do anything differently in your career on your trajectory of going through the engineering school and getting into sales engineering and now where you are?
I'm not sure in my career, my personal life, I would have done things differently because I was kind of a screw up in college. Took me 8 years to get my 4-year degree, if that tells you anything. And personally, I struggled a lot early on with stress and anxiety. A lot of sleepless nights, a lot of fear, a lot of it was terrible at some points. And I'm like most guys, like I don't need any help. We get through this, and this kind of stuff. And that was not a smart attitude to have. So if I can go back to my younger self, I would say, hey man, go get some help with your anxiety, and the fact that you're up 5 nights a week is probably not very healthy either. So see if you can get some help with that. So that would be the thing I would do, and just to try to relax a little bit more and enjoy life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you only got one.
You only get one, and it was only recently that I've learned to kind of relax and enjoy the day as it comes, and be grateful for what you have, rather than always wanting something to be different, which is a very stressful way to live.
Yeah, but then now I think you have a certain approach, a certain way to value life that a lot of people will never have access to that because they haven't been through all that pain that you have. So,
yeah,
that's cool.
And there's a lot of people who've been through a lot worse than me. Trust me.
Yeah. But yeah, you come out the other side with a very unique perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe we'll wrap this up with maybe a couple tips for techs out there. Anything that you would have learned more recently, something from HR or just in general. If you were when you talk to techs that are asking for advice in their career, what do you tell them?
I tell them talk to a lot of people. That to me is the path to, if you want to make a change, first of all, make sure you're changing for the right reason, because jobs are jobs, right? Like to me, a job, there's certain jobs that are easier to do than others, but true happiness doesn't come from changing jobs. It comes from looking at what's going on with you as a person, right? Like if you're miserable where you're at, you're probably going to be miserable at company B, right? It's probably not the job, it's because you're going with you wherever you go. So I would say, look at that. And I would say just talk to a lot of people. If you want to go into sales, because for me, like I might have a vision of how that's going to be, but when I actually go to the office and do a ride along with somebody, I'd be like, this isn't at all what I thought it was going to be. And I in college did an internship. Most engineers go into manufacturing plants, and I did an intern in Jacksonville, Florida at a sheetrock manufacturing plant. And I tell you, after about 2 hours of being there, I was like, there's no way I want to do this for a living. It was a hot plant. It was stinky. The workers hated the management. It was just like, it was awful. So, going to talk to people, experiencing it before you make a jump, and, just take your time with it too. Don't do any sudden things.
But yeah, don't be afraid to try. And in the trying, don't be afraid to fail.
Oh, for sure. That could be another hour of stuff for you right there. I love it. But yeah, for sure. I mean, don't be afraid to try, and, don't be scared, or if you're scared, do it anyway. That's my favorite thing is just, you could be scared and still do things.
Yep. Yeah. That's usually where the most amount of growth comes from.
Yeah. 100%. For sure.
Yep. Well, that's awesome. Anything else you want to end with?
Well, thank you for having me, and I love AHR. This was a great show. I'm already looking forward to next year. We're already booking we have a big party every year for our family of brands. We had 1,000 people at the Hard Rock on Saturday. Yeah, it was huge. So next year we're already looking at Vegas, going to rent out a venue, and I'm going to get my hotel room early this time. Usually I wait till the last minute, but I'm going to get my hotel room early. And so thank you for having me, and I appreciate all you guys do for the HVAC community.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. And it was great meeting you for the first time here at AHR, and love your content. So what's your handle on all the socials?
So Tony Mormino on LinkedIn. YouTube is at HVAC TV. On Instagram, it's Tony, there's a space, Mormino. There's already another Tony Mormino. And then on TikTok, it's Tony Mormino. And Facebook is Tony Mormino again, too. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Check them out.
Awesome. Thank you, man.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Bye.